Daniel Sports Central, we go for a college football game preview and prediction on the 2023 Gator Bowl matchup between the Clemson Tigers and the Kentucky Wildcats. A good season for both teams getting to this point. Although, of course, for both teams, they definitely had higher expectations heading into this season. So maybe a letdown in a way for both teams. But overall, this is a game that will give some insight into the future of both teams, what things could look like as we look forward to 2024. And either way, a strong matchup for both teams. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today. Let's get started with their team trends. Clemson beat South Carolina 16-7 to finish out the regular season. This team was 4-4 at a point this season. Heading into November, this was a 4-loss team, and things were looking very dim for the Tigers, but this team found a way in November. They turned things around, starting with a big win over Notre Dame, and so for Clemson, there is some silver lining to be found in what has been overall a really disappointing 2023 season. This was a team that was expected to be a college football playoff contender once again. Turns out an 8-4 team, but considering where this team was heading into November, 8 wins is really not that bad. And as for Kentucky, beat Louisville on the road 38-31, a top 10 team there. Louisville definitely had a bumpy finish to the season, taking a couple of losses, but the way Louisville was looking, I mean, that was a really impressive win there for the Wildcats, going there and beating them by a touchdown. So for Kentucky, 7-5 on the season. This team actually started the season 5-0. They were really strong in September, and obviously October wasn't quite as good, and this team was 2-5 in their last 7 games, but they've also picked up a couple, and those 2 wins were overall really impressive for Kentucky. Games be on Friday, the 29th in Jacksonville. Kickoff is noon Eastern. Spread's going Clemson by 4 here, so Tigers are a slight favorite, as you would probably expect, over under 44.5. FPI is going Clemson as well, 66%. You look at the bowl history, Clemson 26-23 overall. This team hasn't had much success since 2020. They were in the Orange Bowl last season, but lost to Tennessee 31-14. And you think about how this team was in 4 national championship games from 2015 to 2019. I mean, it's definitely been a downfall the past few years, but I still feel like this is a team that can get back there. We've seen it under Dabo Swinney. It can happen, even though it's obviously been a bit disappointing the past couple of years. But as for Kentucky, this team has emerged the past few years as a contender, really in the SEC. I mean, since 2016, this has been a pretty solid team, actually. So it's been 7 years really in a row now where this team has been to bowl games and has been relevant. And they're 12-10 overall. They lost last season in the Music City Bowl against Iowa. Actually got shut out to them 21-0. Last bowl win was against Iowa, though, in 2021, the 2021 season, which would have been the Citrus Bowl. Your stat comparison, Tigers are 66th in points per game, 20th in points allowed. A strong defensive team here in Clemson. Their offense really hasn't lived up, but the defense was what we were expecting it was going to be this year. Although the defense has also had its bad games. I mean, we have seen the defense be better than the offense generally over the course of this season. And obviously the passing game, 84th in passing game this season, 42nd in rushing. You got Cade Klubnik, who's been okay this season. I mean, based on what we saw last year when he came in towards the end of the season, it seemed like this team had definitely an impressive quarterback in Klubnik, a guy with a lot of upside, but just hasn't quite lived up to it this season. Maybe in the future we'll see him, and in 2024 could be a better season for him. But for Kentucky, 54th in points per game, 56th in points allowed. Overall, a pretty balanced team here in Kentucky. They're really strong against the run, not as much against the pass. But obviously you got Devin Leary, who is the NC State transfer, so this is a familiar game for Devin Leary, taking on a Clemson team that he faced multiple times when he was at NC State. So that's obviously something that's interesting here. And I mean, overall, you got in Kentucky Ray Davis, who's been really impressive, over 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns this season. So both teams got playmakers offensively, but overall have definitely been a bit inconsistent. Your recent matchups: Clemson beat South Carolina 16-7, beat North Carolina 31-20. Beat Georgia Tech, who was halfway decent later on in this season, 42-21. And obviously it really started the turnaround in November, beating Notre Dame 31-23 at home. And if you look before that, October was just a tough month for this team. They only scored 17 on Wake Forest, still beat them, but they only scored 17 once again. You lose to Miami on the road in double overtime, lose to NC State as well. I mean, things were looking pretty bad for this team heading into November. So once again, for this team to even really get up to 8 wins, I mean, it would have been a good thing for this team to even get to 7 wins in the regular season based on how things were looking in October. So it's been a good turnaround for Clemson, and I feel like this brings some optimism as well for this team looking forward to 2024, because, I mean, the first couple of months were definitely just not good for Clemson. But for Kentucky, beat Louisville 38-31. Kind of a bad loss at South Carolina. Lost to them by 3. Also lost to Alabama 21-49. Beat Mississippi State 24-3. That was a nice win. And then obviously the loss to Tennessee by 6. So, I mean, they really in October, once this team started playing some solid opponents, that's where things kind of fell apart. Lost to Georgia 51-13. Missouri turned out to be really good this season, lost to them by 17, and Tennessee was a beatable team, almost had them, but lost by 6 in the end. So this could have been an 8 or even 9 win team this season, but just didn't really stack up well against the best teams in the SEC. Your key points, Clemson. After a dim 4-4 start, this team has actually been great. It's been a turnaround for this team, and they've been a lot better once it's been November. But if this team could have played like this the entire season, you just can't help but wonder where Clemson could be right now. But as of now, this team is playing better than an 8-win team. They're playing at the level of, you could say, a 10-win team, I would say. The defense has overall shined this season. The offense has definitely been inconsistent, although the offense has been better down the stretch, maybe outside of that South Carolina game. But there is some silver lining to be found for this Clemson team based on the way they've played in November. And if they can finish off this season with a win over Kentucky, that'd be a 5-game win streak to finish out the season. I feel like that brings some pretty strong optimism to 2024. I mean, this is obviously a bit of a disappointing season, but based on the way this team has improved, if they can beat Kentucky in this matchup, that does lead to probably some higher expectations again for 2024, but maybe some higher confidence as well in this team. But for Kentucky, Devin Leary facing a familiar team, a former ACC quarterback. Now with Kentucky, he's had a good season. Maybe hasn't lived up to quite what people were expecting, but after a 5-0 start, I mean, this team did have a strong start to the season. They were ranked 20th in the country heading into October, but they have been 2-5 in their last 7 games. So they don't have much momentum in Kentucky, but I will say, coming off of a big top 10 win on the road, they do have that nice win, and we've seen that this team can play at a pretty high level. It's just when both sides of the ball click for this team, and defensively, it really hasn't been that way for a good majority of this season. So, and really for both teams as well, a win adds some silver lining to what has been a pretty mediocre season for both teams. I mean, I would go as far as to say that for Kentucky as well, despite the Wildcats not having a very strong history of success. Just because, I mean, they have been in bowl games now, 7 straight seasons. So for Kentucky, it's, especially in comparison to some of the expectations in the preseason, maybe a little bit of a disappointment, but either way, it's still a strong matchup for both teams. A lot of players still in this game, no players really in the transfer portal, which is definitely a positive. And so with that, let's get a prediction here for Clemson and Kentucky coming up here in the Gator Bowl. And in the end, I'm going with Clemson here. 28-24 is my predicted final score. I see this being a pretty moderate scoring, close matchup. Clemson finds a way in the end. I do think, based on the way the Tigers have improved this season, obviously Dabo Swinney has done something right. He hasn't lost this team quite yet. I mean, when they were 4-4 in October, coming off of the NC State loss, it just seemed like the way this team was looking, they were going to lose a couple more in November. But that didn't happen, and Clemson got better this season. Their offense started to click once November hit. So I think Clemson finds a way here. They finish off the season strong and with a 5-game win streak as well. I'm going to say 55% towards Clemson. I'm taking the over in Clemson to cover the spread as well. I think Kentucky, though, definitely stands a chance in this game. They're going to keep it close. But I do think Clemson finds a way to win this one in the end. But with that, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, your score predictions, all of that. My name's Evan. This is All Sports Central. Stay tuned for more. We'll catch you on the next one.